Taylor Riggs. This is the best of Bloomberg Technology, where we bring you all of our top interviews from this week in tech. Coming up, WeWork rework. The company finally puts an official pause on its IPO plans. What changes need to be made before hitting the public markets? Plus, record rollout. It was a new high for Tesla deliveries, but they did not meet Elon Musk's lofty prediction. We'll break down all the numbers for you. And Microsoft stopped making phones years ago, and now it's back with a new model that will run on Google's Android system. Is now the time to get back into the slowing global smartphone market. But first, to our top story. On Monday, WeWork pulled the plug on its IPO, at least temporarily. The new co-CEOs of the office-based company say they want to focus on the core business before going public, which they still plan to do at some point in the future. WeWork has been burning through cash and is now planning thousands of job cuts and will put some of its businesses up for sale. Bloomberg's Kurt Wagner talked to Wedbush analyst Dan Ives and Bloomberg's Ellen Hewitt, who covers the company.
It's official. The IPO is going to be put on hold. So they said this morning that they're going to be pulling the S1. That confirms a lot of the reporting that we've had in the last week or two, which is that the IPO is unlikely to happen in 2019, likely to be pushed until next year. So they're going to be spending the next few months with these new co-CEOs trying to show Wall Street, we're going to cut back on expenses. We're going to make changes at this company. It's no longer going to be a company with this wide variety of businesses alongside its main core business, which is renting out office space.
Now, was there any one specific moment you think that kind of gave the, officials there the idea that they should pull back on this plan?
I think it seemed pretty clear from the time last Tuesday when Adam Neumann, the CEO and co-founder, stepped down, that there was going to be a lot of changes at the company. So all of a sudden, you have these two new leaders, people who were both WeWork insiders, but also had experience at other large companies outside, taking over. And immediately, I think observers, including myself, were thinking, how are they going to actually continue forward with their plan, as they had said earlier, to finish the IPO in 2019. There's just so much to get done. There's been such a change at the company, and they were already talking from that first day of new leadership about difficult decisions that they were going to have to make in order for the company to go forward. So I think we were not surprised to see that they're putting an official pause, as they called it, on their plans.
Yeah. Dan, I want to bring you in here. I know that obviously there were some other elements of this IPO. There was some credit financing, for example, that was supposedly going to come when the IPO happened. Can you give us a sense of where WeWork's financials are right now? I'm sure the company needs some money. What is the business like?
Yeah, I think right now, look, this has been a black eye, obviously, for WeWork, as well as the IPO market really putting a white flag, showing that investors are not going to buy some of these business models for frothier valuations, but it really hits on cash burn profitability. And that's why I think right now they're obviously going to have to go back from a financing perspective, figuring out sort of, next steps here as the fork in the road situation. But, as you've talked about, the first thing, they got to cut costs, divest some of the pieces, and ultimately really put this car back in the body shop until it comes out maybe healthier, for an IPO later this year into next year, if you think about best case 2020.
Now, I know that SoftBank is obviously heavily involved in this company right now. Dan, can you give us a sense of what their involvement might be moving forward? I know there's been talk of maybe them providing some of that capital to WeWork. What is SoftBank's role going to be?
Yeah, especially with Newman out. They're going to have to roll up the sleeves. It's going to be hands-on deck in terms of not just the financing piece, but just the business operations. Especially when you look at a lot of employees have joined WeWork with IPO, with some of the comp perspectives that now are at least temporarily off the table. So they're really going to need to make sure that the house is in order, look at the business model. And really right now what investors are seeing, and you start to see with Uber and Lyft, and obviously you've seen WeWork and others, Peloton, it's about profitability. needs to be a path to profitability as risk starts to come off in this market. And it's a fork in the road situation for IPOs. You have the Zooms, the Beyond Meats, but WeWork continues to be the poster child for what ultimately is investors saying no more in terms of these business models that lack profitability, at least a path.
Ellen, Dan mentioned path to profitability. You mentioned tough decisions that need to be made. What actually happens next at WeWork?
Yeah, so we've reported on some of the things that they've started to do, notably, and I think more of a symbolic gesture than anything else. The new co-CEOs said that the company wants to sell the $60 million Gulfstream jet that the company bought last year to help Adam Neumann fly around and do travel for his job. That was something that obviously got a lot of headlines. $60 million, they're going to need more than that to keep going. They've also discussed selling several side businesses that they acquired in the last few years. That includes Meetup, Managed by Q, and Conductor. And there's also talk about job cuts. As we've reported, it seems like the company will probably cut maybe in the thousands of jobs. They currently have about 12,000 or 12,500 employees, so pretty serious. And so I think they're looking around to see where they can make changes. And we'll have to see if that comes in different parts of the business or maybe also some trimming in the main business as well.
Yeah, you mentioned job cuts. What does this do for morale? I mean, you have employees who just a few weeks ago, they were seeing a big payday on the horizon, and now all of a sudden the CEO's gone and their jobs may be on the line. What is the morale at the company? How do you move past something like this if you're WeWork?
Yeah, I mean, I've talked to a few people who are still there. Obviously, it's tough times. Like, you can't imagine how difficult it is to know that there are going to be these things coming ahead at your company and not knowing exactly where, or, just going through the change of the last 6 months. As you said, they really thought that the company was going to go full speed ahead to an IPO. I think for a lot of employees, they're reassessing how much they think their stock is worth. They're worried about their jobs. They're concerned about what might go forward. I think it's going to be really difficult, and I feel for them.
Yeah. Dan, one more for you here. What does this mean for the broader IPO market right now? When you see WeWork had these kinds of struggles, is this a signal for other companies out there that are thinking about IPOing? What do you take away from this from a big picture standpoint?
Yeah, big picture, it's been a black eye, no doubt, and for the broader market. But I think it also shows that the companies with the strong business models, profitability, with the secular trends, there's an appetite for those names. But the ones more frothier, that continue to have sort of issues, profitability, as well as business models, investors, especially in this market, those are not names that are going to get through, and especially valuations that are not down rounds, right, from where they went private. So I think this is a shot across the bow from Wall Street to the Valley, especially on the private side, saying, look, we're not going to take some of those private valuations, and we're going to command valuations that we feel comfortable with. So I think this was, ultimately, I think a line in the sand was drawn here with WeWork, and I think we're going to see the ramifications for months and maybe years to come.
That was Wedbush analyst Dan Ives and Bloomberg's Ellen Hewitt with our own Kurt Wagner. And coming up, Tesla misses the mark. Third quarter delivery set a record 97,000, but it's not enough for investors. We'll have the details. And if you like Bloomberg News, check us out on the radio. You can listen on the Bloomberg app, Bloomberg.com, and in the U.S. on Sirius XM. This is Bloomberg. Tesla news dominated the week as Elon Musk's 100,000 delivery goal went unmet. The company reported it had 97,000 deliveries in the third quarter on Wednesday. Earlier this week, analysts mentioned the 100,000 delivery goal put forth by Musk may have been talk in order to divert attention from the potential for a less flattering trend, falling revenue. To discuss, I was joined by Gene Munster of Loop Ventures, and from Detroit, Bloomberg's David Welch.
It's a record for them, but it's not a record by much. And then you had Musk saying that they could probably get to 100,000 vehicles if they pushed. I do wonder if he hadn't said anything, if the shares would be reacting better, because it really was a solid quarter for them. I think the other more alarming thing for investors is the fact that most of the vehicles being sold are now lower priced, lower margin Model 3s, and you're starting to see a lot less take on Model S and Model X, which are the really expensive vehicles. And the question for investors is, okay, where are the profits going to come from if you're selling a lot of these smaller, cheaper, lower margin vehicles?
Gene, what's your take on the 97,000 number?
Taylor, I think it's a great number. I am in the camp also that it would be perceived as much better if not for the Friday email. And I think that there's two topics here. There's what's going on with the fundamentals of Tesla, and then there's what's going on with the communications around the story. And Elon Musk continues to say things that are not good for the stock in this case. And separately, if we just look at the fundamentals, which ultimately should be the most important, is the fact that they got a record. The 97, just to put that into context, that puts them loosely on track to hit the low end of a range of 360 to 400,000 vehicles for the year. But when they originally came out with that range, investors said it is near absurdity that they would do that, and they are tracking towards that low end. So I think that it is, despite the mix of the greater Model 3s, it's 82% Model 3s. It's generally consistent with the mix in the June quarter. So my simple read is I think that this is a sign that the demand question, this is no longer about a production question on Tesla, that the demand question continues to be answered, that it seems that the U.S., at least, and parts of Europe, are ready for EVs.
And Gene, what's your take on what David Welch was mentioning, that they're sacrificing price and those margins for the sake of market share, selling those lower price vehicles?
My view, it's true, that's a fact. But my view is that the sweet spot of electrification is going to be in lower cost, lower margin vehicles. And it's still, call it 2% of vehicles in the U.S. So I think that even though that is at a high level, that is not a good trade from higher margin to lower margin, but just the size of the market is so massive. That's the real sweet spot of the S-curve. I think it's the right thing for the company to continue to aggressively pursue that part of the market.
David, how is demand in China?
There's very strong demand relative to other markets in China for electric vehicles, and the government certainly helps that with a lot of programs there that both make manufacturers basically sell these vehicles there for certain credit systems, and there are a lot of incentives for consumers to buy them. In some of the major cities, you can't get a new registration for a vehicle unless it is some kind of plug-in car. So there's good demand there. To Gene's point, and it's a very good one, is to get the demand, to get scale, they're going to have to sell a lot of Model 3s, a lot of lower priced vehicles. That is what's going to build this market, and there's certainly an appetite for it in China and probably Europe as well. The question going forward is still one of margins, though, because Tesla's going to have to lower costs and show a profit on these vehicles. They have a very big staff at the plant. They're not the most efficient manufacturer. They've been trying to lean things up in Fremont, and they will in their new factories as well. But they've got to show that they can make a profit on these vehicles as they ramp up volume, and that's just going to be a matter of building up their systems and getting better scale, and proving that they can really operate this company. The shares are no longer really trading on the hope that they're going to grow. They're going to be trading on whether or not they can execute the business.
Gene, any path to profitability?
I think eventually, yes. That scalability that David's talking about, they're taking this approach of kind of fit to print with these new, whether it's Gigafactory in China or what they're going to be doing in Europe. So the markets more recently have not been favorable to companies that are losing stories. That's not news to anyone. But I think what is still important is when you have these massive opportunities, and I think electrification falls under the group of an undeniable truth. I think that investors will be, despite the trend in the market towards profitability, I think they will be more lenient towards Tesla. I think they have been. And I think they will continue to give the company room as long as the demand is there I think that they will give them room in the path to profitability. And if I'm wrong, and they continue to burn cash, I don't know what the cash burn is this quarter, I think that if the demand continues to be there, I think they will be successful at continuing to raise money. They don't need to raise money for a few years, but I don't think that profitability is the critical question right now. I think demand is, and they're doing a great job.
That was Gene Munster of Loop Ventures and Bloomberg's David Welch. Facebook also was in the news this week as Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg appears poised to take on the U.S. government if Senator Elizabeth Warren wins the presidency. That's from leaked audio obtained by The Verge of Zuckerberg during a July meeting with employees.
Like Elizabeth Warren, who thinks that the right answer is to break up the companies, if she gets elected president, then I would bet that we will have a legal challenge, and I would bet that we will win the legal challenge. So does that still suck for us? Yeah, I don't have to, have a major lawsuit against our own government. That's not like the position that you want to be in when you're, it's like we care about our country and want to work with our government to do good things. And but look, at the end of the day, if someone's going to try to threaten something that existential, you go to the mat and you fight.
Zuckerberg also spoke on other topics, including Facebook's proposed cryptocurrency Libra and its competition with Chinese-based video app TikTok. For more, I caught up with Carl Szabo, General Counsel for NetChoice, which lobbies on behalf of companies like Facebook and Google, and Bloomberg's Sarah Frier, who covers Facebook.
Well, it's not just only a matter of regulating 20 different companies. Let's keep in mind that there are over a dozen different government agencies that have oversight over the tech industry. But it's also the notion of having a centralized place where platforms can figure out what content is spam, what content are bots, what content is coming from overseas, and then in a more comprehensive fashion, address those problems. So that's what I think Mark's talking about here. Since Facebook is rather large, they do have the financial backing and the ability to see many different points of attack so that it can better prepare and protect American interests and American democracy.
And Sarah, talk to me about Facebook's argument, really, and I've heard this from several experts that
over and over, this argument that being bigger helps them solve the problems more efficiently and with better resources. I just don't really buy it. I think that if you're Facebook and you have all of these different services, certainly you can say if you're finding this problem on Instagram, you might find it on Messenger too, and you might find it on WhatsApp. But there's also some collaborations they've done with companies outside of Facebook. They have this Atlantic Council to take down terrorist content, and they share this terrorist content amongst themselves. They do the same thing with child exploitation content so that all the companies can take it down at once. And so if the companies were broken up, you could easily have that same kind of arrangement where they all share information broadly.
And Sarah, I want to pivot quickly here a little bit to competition, because Carl brought up the very smart point of competition and Facebook internally, talking about TikTok, which is, a social media and sort of a video platform. And Facebook is responding to that competition by developing, I believe it's Lasso. Did we learn anything new today about that product with these leaked recordings?
It's really interesting that Zuckerberg wants to try to push Lasso in countries where TikTok is not yet big. And I also found it interesting that he sees TikTok as sort of like Instagram Explore meets Instagram Stories, and that he's going to try to shift Instagram in that direction. Look, he's tried this many times over the years, copying products, trying to push them out to a similar user base, but we really haven't seen that really take hold except for with Instagram Stories. So it's always a shot in the dark. We'll see if it works, but it's very interesting that TikTok is the new existential threat on the competition side for Facebook.
That was Carl Szabo, General Counsel for NetChoice, and Bloomberg's Sarah Frier. And still ahead, President Trump's impeachment inquiry takes center stage in Washington. Will that affect the various antitrust probes into big tech? We explore the reach of federal resources. Also later, the big 5G rollout. We'll hear from Verizon CEO Hans Vestberg. This is Bloomberg. The millennial mainstay Forever 21 has filed for bankruptcy. The fast fashion retailer saying it has obtained $350 million in financing to help it stay afloat. But the bankruptcy shows another sign of those punishing pressures of the broader retail apocalypse, in which the rise of e-commerce is siphoning away shoppers from brick and mortar chains. For more, I caught up with Bloomberg opinion columnist Sarah Halsack.
They said e-commerce comprised 16% of their sales in the court filing, and that would be a lower penetration than we see for the apparel business overall. And you just don't have to look that far to see the companies that are sort of eating Forever 21's lunch in this space. I think Fashion Nova is a great example of that. They were an early pioneer to sort of building a fast fashion brand that was tailored from Instagram from the start. And I think that Forever 21 has suffered at the hands of brands like that.
You mentioned Instagram. Talk to me. How has social media and Instagram changed the way the marketing really these fast fashion retailers can or can't survive?
Yeah, so I think a lot of these retailers have had to partner with influencers, of course. And again, Fashion Nova has gotten the likes of Cardi B and Kylie Jenner, these huge names with millennial and Gen Z consumers to hawk their products on Instagram. And Forever 21 maybe has had a little bit less success in that realm. Instagram is also, rolling out features like shoppable posts that all of these brands have to try to figure out how to master and keep up with. And look, it's important for any retail brand to understand that ecosystem, but especially for one like Forever 21 that courts a teen shopper, it's just really, really important.
So we know the story with Forever 21. A 16% penetration rate online simply in this day and age does not cut it. Enter Stage Right, and you have e-commerce subscription models. You have companies like Rent the Runway. The list goes on, really disrupting this market. What is the difference, like a Stitch Fix, a subscription-based model, a Rent the Runway? What are they doing to disrupt the market?
Yeah, so Stitch Fix, I think in particular, is really a data play. So they are trying to amass all this data on their consumer, and they've sort of built their brand from the beginning on that idea that they're not just sort of thinking of merchandising as an art, but as a real science. And so thinking of everything from the measurement of a sleeve to the aesthetic of a particular garment, all of that is based on feedback that they're getting from customers from these boxes. And so the theory is that they're going to be able to manage their inventory in a smarter way and just create a more pleasing experience for customers over the long haul. Fast fashion has sort of been more of a let 1,000 flowers bloom model. A company like Forever 21 is getting 5 shipments a week to its stores of garments, and some of them are going to be hits and some of them are going to be misses. Definitely these upstarts like Stitch Fix are bringing something new to the game.
And Sarah, are these idiosyncratic stories, or is this a general theme that you have to be, like you said, more now science-based, data-based in order to succeed in this ever-competitive market?
So there's definitely idiosyncratic things about Forever 21. They overexpanded their stores way too quickly. They had stores that were huge, right, that were 35,000 square feet and maybe only needed to be 10,000 square feet. So those are things that are sort of specific to the decisions that they made. But to me, there's no doubt that data is going to play an increasing role in how you market to consumers and how you buy your inventory, and even your merchandising decisions in your stores and on your website. And I think we're still at this place right now where retailers have a lot of data and they don't know how to harness it. And the ones that figure out how to actually use it and make it actionable, those are going to be the ones that win.
That was Sarah Halsack of Bloomberg Opinion. And still ahead, Microsoft is getting back into the smartphone game, but is now the right time? Given the global slowdown, we get the details on its foldable phone in a bit. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology, and be sure to follow our global breaking news network at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg. Welcome back to the best of Bloomberg Technology. I'm Taylor Riggs. The U.S. Department of Justice, Federal Communications Commission, and attorneys general across the U.S. are keeping a close eye on big tech. There are possible probes and inquiries into companies like Apple, Amazon, Facebook, and Google. As a result, there have also been calls from presidential hopefuls like Senator Elizabeth Warren and Bernie Sanders to break up some of these companies. But now, with all eyes on the impeachment inquiry into President Trump, does big tech get a breather? On Monday, Bloomberg's Kurt Wagner checked in with Bloomberg Technology's Eric Newcomer and Sally Hubbard, Director of Enforcement Strategy at the Open Markets Institute. Prior to that, Sally served as an Assistant Attorney General in the Antitrust Bureau of New York State.
I think in the short term, certainly in terms of the media environment, I mean, the fact is antitrust has become a political conversation, and that attention has animated a lot more action than we've seen for many years. And so when the story turns to impeachment, there is a degree to which, Facebook, Google, Amazon can, take a breath and sort of figure out their strategies. In the long run, these government officials know that the conversation will turn back to them and will keep working. But certainly for this moment, impeachment has sucked a lot of the oxygen out of the room.
Sally, what do you think here? Do you think that this is a lot of distraction just in the press and on the surface, or is this something that might actually help kind of behind the scenes?
I think it might affect the press and the coverage in the media, but I don't think it's going to affect the actual investigations. At this point, they're really in the hands of the antitrust worker bees, the staff attorneys who are working diligently, and the political decisions were already made. Those were the decisions to investigate. Now we are in the process of document requests and document review and depositions. All of that stuff takes time, and I don't think the impeachment is going to distract from the work that the attorneys are doing on the ground level.
There's a bunch of different investigations. There's obviously the attorneys general, there's the DOJ, the FTC. Sally, I'm curious, are any of those organizations perhaps more impacted by an impeachment process than others?
I would say DOJ would probably be the most impacted by an impeachment process, just because, there have been some implications of the Attorney General Barr could get wrapped up in that whole mess. So I think the DOJ potentially, but at the same time, we have the whole antitrust division that's staffed with antitrust career lawyers who are already, working away. So in terms of if there's any effect, the agency that would be most affected would be DOJ. I don't think state AGs or the FTC will feel any impact.
Eric, we've seen this play out, although it's been a while, with tech companies like Microsoft. I'm curious, what do you think this does from a distraction standpoint for a lot of these big tech companies? Is there anything that they can do to ensure that they're not totally derailed by something like this?
It just seems like they need to get their message right. I mean, certainly in sort of the media ecosystem, they just keep getting hit, one thing after another, whether it's sort of Apple's handling of its App Store. They're just new stories one after another of where these companies have antitrust vulnerabilities. And so I think getting to a place where you have sort of a more positive message, if that's possible, would be the hope. And so this is a moment where they can sort of collect themselves. But, I totally agree that the actual investigation is happening, and that the fact that they got in this situation where they're such a target, now it's somewhat out of their hands.
Eric, you mentioned the App Store. We were talking before the break about the advertising opportunities that Facebook and Google have. I'm wondering, is there any particular market or any particular business line that you think might be the most vulnerable right now?
Well, I mean, Elizabeth Warren has been driving this conversation and put out a framework back in March, which really focuses on areas where tech companies compete with people on their platform. So if you're Google and selling ads, or you're Amazon and selling products against people in your marketplace, I think those are areas where she's focused on. But there's so much power in the technology industry, and now that it's a bipartisan issue where Republicans and Democrats are game to go after the tech companies, there are a lot of vulnerable areas here.
Sally, I'm wondering, for those of us who have not necessarily seen this play out as often as others, what are the actual next steps that people should expect? What is the government going to be doing that these tech companies are going to be seeing in the very near future?
Yeah, so the next steps are really reviewing some of the document requests. You know, the state AGs have issued CIDs, which are basically subpoenas to the tech giants. Particularly, you know, there's 50 state AGs who have joined together to investigate Google, and they've served CIDs, and 9 who are serving CIDs to Facebook. We've seen the House Judiciary Subcommittee issued extensive document requests. So right now it's going to be answering, you know, producing those requests. Producing documents that are responding to those requests, and then it's going to be millions of documents. So it's going to take time for the attorneys at all of these organizations and agencies to review it and to figure out where are the strongest claims that can be brought, and, you know, how can they build a case.
That was Bloomberg's Kurt Wagner. He checked in with Bloomberg Technology's Eric Newcomer and Sally Hubbard of the Open Markets Institute. And coming up, Microsoft unveils its foldable phone, but is now the right time for the company to get back into smartphones? We discuss. And Waze carpooling hits its 1-year anniversary. We look at how users are sharing their cars and not just their traffic tips. Our exclusive conversation with CEO Noam Bardeen in a bit. This is Bloomberg. Microsoft has unveiled a number of new products, including a new Surface Neo laptop with a 360-degree hinge and 2 9-inch screens, and a redesigned version of its Surface Pro hybrid tablet laptop. But the star of the new lineup unveiled Wednesday, a dual-screen foldable phone that will run on Google's Android operating system, jumping back into a market it exited years ago. For details, I spoke with Youssef Mehdi, Microsoft Corporate Vice President of Modern Life, Search, and Devices.
The way we think about it is we're in the Surface business, and what we've wanted to do for a long time is solve this problem for customers, which is how can you be really productive while being mobile? If you've had this problem like most of us, where you start an email on your phone, you say, hey, can I get back to you when I get back to my PC? It's because you've got that difficulty of getting that solved. We want to help that with Surface and have one that you can fit in your pocket with dual screens that lets you really be productive and creative.
And why the Android software?
Well, we have announced actually 2 dual screen devices today, Surface Duo and Surface Neo. Surface Duo, the one that fits in your pocket, we felt should run Android, because when you want to be mobile, you want to run the millions and millions of Android apps. It made sense to us to do that, and so we got that on there. On the Surface Neo, which is more of a PC-like form factor when you want to use it as a PC, we put the new expression of Windows called Windows 10X that lets you run full Windows apps and be super productive and mobile.
The smartphone hardware market is very crowded. Is your foldable phone, if I can call it that, your way of differentiating yourself?
Yeah, the way we think about it is exactly right. We think that there is an opportunity for a new category. We feel we're at the beginning in the tech industry of a new set of devices that we think of as dual screen. We see it in the research. People are actually 44% more productive with 2 screens when you've got the ability to your brain to work with right and left. We want to unlock this new category of computing that allows you to be much more creative, bring new types of apps into play, new types of postures with the device, things that you haven't seen before, from read mode to tablet mode to laptop to compose. A lot of great new capabilities. We think this is just the beginning. We see the whole industry moving on this opportunity.
Well, you mentioned apps. Am I able to use then both Microsoft's apps and Android apps on one, fold them over each other?
So the way we think about it, yeah, so on Surface Duo, what's going to be great is we will have a superset. We'll have the best of Android and the best of Microsoft together. And we've been working with Google to make that happen for today's announcement, and we're delighted about the collaboration we've got. We think we're going to have something special for customers.
I've been talking a little bit about the phone, for a lack of a better word for me. Talk to me about some of the new improvements on that laptop. What are some of the best improvements you made?
So some of the best things on Surface Neo are a couple things. First of all, as we said, really the ability to do things you can't do today. If you're on a Teams call or a conference call, you can now watch the video and on the right take notes and be able to interact between the two. You can add a keyboard when you want to and then get really productive and write notes, but if you want, you can take it off. You can flip it over, and so if I was, for example, doing this interview with you and I had my device with me, I could flip it inverted and see my notes while I'm actually showing you on the screen. So this ability to have new postures, to run full Windows capability and be really productive while being mobile, that's a unique capability.
This is a very, very crowded market. In just the last few weeks, we've had hardware and product launches from Facebook, Amazon, Apple, you name it. Where does your hardware strategy fit into that competitive world?
Well, for us, the devices business, Surface business is really a super important business for Microsoft, really in three ways. First and foremost, it's become an amazing business unto itself. It's a multi-billion-dollar business now that's growing very rapidly. Secondly, we are actually inspiring the ecosystem of Windows PCs with our Surface devices. So, for example, we kickstarted the 2-in-1 category that most people didn't think it really existed or had a market. It's now a $30 billion market. And lastly, our devices really open up the opportunity for our broader cloud and business productivity market. So Office 365, Microsoft 365, they shine on top of our new Surface devices. And so that's really how we see the opportunity from where we're coming from.
And quickly here, what are you doing to make sure that my privacy is protected?
Well, at Microsoft, privacy, we believe, is a fundamental human right. We bake it in from the get-go. We're fortunate in that our business model isn't predicated on having to make money off other people's data. So we want to put that in. We put the user in control. So we maximize transparency and control of your data and let you choose what you choose to share or not share.
That was Yusuf Mehdi, Microsoft Corporate Vice President of Modern Life, Search, and Devices. Telecom giant Verizon is focused almost solely on 5G technology to drive its next leg of growth, but it faces stiff competition. At issue, whether T-Mobile is able to complete its $26.5 billion takeover of Sprint. The combination would make for a three-way race with Verizon, AT&T, and T-Mobile to build and capitalize on the new 5G service. From the Tech Disrupt conference in San Francisco Wednesday, I talked to Verizon CEO Hans Vestberg.
Yeah, as we said when we had the earnings call in the second quarter, for the mobility case, we have a plan to have 30 cities by year end. We have 13 right now, so we're adding every week. We added New York last week. But we're not only doing that, we also have done 13 NFL stadiums, and then NBA season haven't even started. We believe that our 5G, for the consumer point of view, should be in the most dense and populated areas where you have a lot of throughput and data, and that's where our 5G is just crushing it. So that's where we are focusing right now on our mobility build. But as you know, we also do 5G home, and in the fourth quarter we're going to launch our 5G mobile edge compute, which is an enterprise service with the all new capabilities of 5G.
You know, AT&T has been leading the charge a little bit in terms of nationwide rollout. When can we expect from Verizon nationwide rollout of 5G?
I think that what we are preparing right now is that we have the best 4G network in the market. We will continue to see that our customers get the best experience on the technology we have. We are giving them the first experience of 5G. We were first with the 5G home. We were first with the 5G with the smartphone. At the same time, we keep our 4G network at state of the art. So we will continue to do that. And when we see that the market is ready, and we will have a national coverage as well. But usually we speak less and we execute when we have it, and then we talk. So that's our strategy.
Hans, do you need more spectrum for 5G? Have you talked about an auction for some of those mid-bands that potentially could happen from the FCC?
First of all, there is an ongoing auction, so I'm a little bit sensitive what I can say about spectrum in general. But I've said it before, we have all the assets to launch a very competitive 5G experience, if that's coverage or millimeter wave for consumers, for large enterprises, mobile edge compute. We have all those assets.
We've talked about 5G that arguably holds a little bit more of an advantage for the business customer than the consumer. How can you capitalize on the business customer?
I think that all will benefit from it, but to be honest, design from the beginning was very much to make the world cordless for enterprise and society. So the 5G mobile edge compute that we're going to launch the first center at the end of this year, that's really where you can, as an enterprise, start innovating, doing a factory wireless for all your robots, for example, or putting up a 5G campus network or a private 5G network, all with a throughput, speed, and latency that is unparalleled what you have today, and suddenly you can innovate around that. So of course, Myself have met many of the Fortune 100 enterprises in this country the last 6 months to talk to them, showing the platform we're going to create and how they can innovate to it. Because this is a partnership with us, with the customer, and probably in some cases some software developers as well that have softwares that is needed for it.
You know, it's interesting. I've been speaking with some analysts who've tried 5G in South Korea and other places, and some of them say it doesn't quite live up to the hype. How is the transition from 3G to 4G compared to 4G to 5G? Does 5G live up to all the hype?
I think that there is a huge difference. I mean, 3G to 4G was, of course, an improvement of throughput and speed, which was visible. But to be honest, the move from 4G to 5G is even greater. It's the speed is so much faster, the throughput is so much more, and the latency. So, of course, it's all about an ecosystem that you sort of get devices out. And sometimes we talk a lot about consumers, and right now, basically, we have 4 phones already right now, smartphones out in the market. All of them are 5G enabled. So we see that whole ecosystem coming from consumers. But then, as you said yourself, but then you have an enterprise business, and we also have a 5G home business where we actually are doing the last mile with 5G instead of fiber, which is a total different way of thinking about the business model for fixed wireless access, bringing broadband to your home. So it's very different, the 5G, because you can have several business cases on the same infrastructure because it's the same network. It's the same infrastructure you're building on. It's not a separate network for all these business cases I'm talking about. It's the same.
I want to talk about the fundamentals of your business. When can we expect 5G revenue to offset the decline in the wireline business?
I think that we have been very clear when we had our capital market days in February that when it comes to the mobility, we will have an impact of 5G in 2021. When it comes to 5G home, the same, 2021. And when it comes to 5G mobile edge compute, 2022. So we have been very clear with that. And remember, we're a large company. 4G will not go away. It's an extremely important sort of technology, and our customers on 4G. And remember, that's not strange that you will have 4G customers for a long, long time. So you need to continue to have the best 4G network as well.
And have you modeled out any potential competition, subscriber losses, if that T-Mobile Sprint deal does go through?
I think that we all need to work with our own assets. Of course, then it's happening a lot in the marketplace, which you, of course, are listening and thinking about. I think that whatever is happening, we have our strategy and we're going to execute on our strategy. We believe in our network. We believe in our 5G platform and the use cases we have, and that's what we're going to execute on. Then, of course, as we see more competition and more discussion around 5G, that just proves the case, how important 5G is going to be for the country, for the enterprises, and for the telecom industry.
You've done a restructuring recently. Do you feel like you're right-sized?
I think that, I'm not sure if you're referring to our voluntary program that we had in November 1 year ago, which ultimately was 10,400 employees leaving us over 6 months. That is finished right now. So I think we have done some process changes in the company. We have also started outsourcing some more IT that we haven't done before, and ultimately 17,000 employees has left the company in 12 months. So we continue, of course, to be efficient, but that's part of what we do every day. But not only that, we're also looking for the new growth opportunities. So it's how you run a company.
Right. That was Verizon CEO Hans Vestberg from the Tech Disrupt conference Wednesday. And coming up, it's a notable name in the navigation world, Waze. We'll hear from the CEO next on how its carpooling feature is different than ride sharing. This is Bloomberg. Last week, RBC analyst Mark Mahaney called Waze and Google Maps, quote, buried treasures for Alphabet. Mahaney also noted the potential for Waze to offer more solutions for Maps advertisers, thanks to all the data it's collected on users' rides. And this all comes as Waze reached 1 year of its carpool feature that just completed 140,000 shared rides last week. Waze CEO and founder Noam Bardin joined me Wednesday.
You know, when Waze got started, our mission has always been about fighting traffic. We're known for shaving time off your route in different ways, but frankly, we're running out of options. We all feel this, right? Traffic keeps getting worse. And the only way we can really impact our everyday traffic challenges is by getting more people to every car. And this is what carpool is about. It's very different than ride sharing or other for-profit businesses. This is really about trying to work together as a community to lower the number of cars on the road and really improve our daily life.
And talk to me about how much revenue carpool contributes to Waze.
So we haven't released revenue numbers, but carpool in general is about sharing a car. And so the rider actually pays a portion of the cost of driving the car, and the driver gets a portion of that cost back to them. And so there is money changing hands here, but it's all below what would be considered profit. And this means that you're not paying taxes, you're not a commercial driver, you're not a ride-sharing business. We limit you to only 2 rides a day. So it's really about rides are happening anyway. If you're driving to work anyway, take someone with you. This is not about you finding a new job.
Do you consider Uber Pool a competitor? If so, how do you compete with them?
No, not at all. We're focused very much on the long haul from the suburbs to the city. Obviously, if you're in a city, it makes a lot of sense to use all the different ride-sharing services and all the different transportation services. But if you live in the suburbs and you're driving in and you're sitting an hour and a half in traffic, you really don't have many options, right? No one is building public transit. No one is investing in roads. The government's not going to save us. So we really have to take our future into our own hands. And we look in your car and you look at people around you, their cars are empty, right? We've got extra seats waiting there. And what we at Waze do is actually take care of the friction, finding someone, dealing with the payments, handling everything that has to do around that so that you can leave your car at home and ride with someone else.
Are you still doing data sharing with cities?
Correct. We're sharing data with a lot of different cities, and cities have been very supportive of our carpooling efforts because they see the same problem, right? If you think about a DOT or a municipality, their challenge is how do we get less cars on the road? So we have cities that are actually sponsoring our service. They're even subsidizing rides for their citizens. San Diego, Miami are great examples of cities who started as partners of us for data, but now have gone much deeper to help promote our service together to their citizens.
Are there any concerns about privacy in the data sharing?
So obviously you opt into the service, you only share the data that you wish to share, and our goal is to allow users to make their own choice. We'll show you who the users are, who could ride in the car for you, but you have to decide who you feel comfortable with. We have a feature that allows you to only ride with people of your own gender. We have a feature that only allows you to ride people from your own company. So it really depends on how you feel in terms of trust. But when you think about it, at the end of the day, you're leaving money on the table today by driving alone. It's extremely expensive. And at the same time, you're creating traffic. So here's a way to make a little money, save time, get into the HOV lane, and do really better for the world, because 30% of global emissions are coming from transportation.
You know, Noam, at the top of the show, we were talking about how an RBC analyst said that Maps and Waze really have the potential to be monetized and could contribute to Google and Apple. Do you see that monetization of Maps helpful, or does that hurt Waze?
So obviously, as any business, we have to be rational, right? We have to be able to have income, and we've got to be profitable, because if not, we can never achieve our mission. And there's a thin line between being mission-driven and being, rational in terms of your financials. And we're very focused on that. And this is why we have to have a rational business model. And there's tremendous potential in Maps in general, right? Transportation is a multi-trillion-dollar business that's all being reinvented in the current years. So there's a lot to go around. That being said, how and who is something that we're all working on together as an industry to try and figure out.
That was Waze CEO and founder Noam Bardin. And that does it for this edition of the Best of Bloomberg Technology. We bring you all the latest in tech throughout the week. Tune in each day, 5 p.m. New York, 2 p.m. in San Francisco. And Bloomberg Technology is live streaming on Twitter. Check us out at Technology, and be sure to follow our global breaking news network at TikTok on Twitter. This is Bloomberg.